So students, I am going to discuss about environmental determinism, which is also known as naturalization of human, from the first chapter of human geography book. The name of the chapter is Nature and Scope of Human Geography. So here what we are going to discuss is about the early human beings, okay, about the interrelationship between the early human beings and the nature. Means how the nature it dictated the life of the early human beings and all, and how the human beings were naturalized actually. Okay, means how did the environment it played a very important factor in the life of the human beings and all that we are going to discuss. Okay. So just take it as a story about the early human beings. It will help you to understand in a more better way, in a more clear way. So human beings interacted with the physical environment with the help of technology, and it is important it is not important what human beings produce and create, but it is extremely important with the help of what tools and techniques do they produce and create. So we human beings, we interact with the physical environment with the technology. Okay. We are exploiting the natural nature and the natural resources with the help of the technology. Like at present, we are taking out the mineral resources, okay, like the coal, petroleum and all. They are being extracted and utilized for the development of the human beings. How? With the help of the technology. Okay. So it is not important that what we are producing actually. Okay, it is not important what we are producing and creating, but it is extremely important to know that with the help of what tools and techniques we are actually utilizing or we are actually producing the things and all. Okay, because the technology which we are using at present was not available in the earlier period of time, and the technology which was available in the earlier period of time, it has got evolved. Okay, it has got transformed actually. Okay, so this is why it is very much important to understand the tools and the techniques which are being utilized at present to produce or to create any kind of things on the earth actually. Okay, so all these elements, okay, all these things which are being produced at present by the help of technology, okay, it is being produced by exploiting the nature, it is being produced by using the natural resources and all. Okay, so the technology, okay, the level of technology, it indicates the level of cultural development of the society. Okay, so the level of technology, okay, technology indicates the level of cultural development of society. Okay, so you can see that there are many countries in the world which are technologically very much advanced, whereas there are many countries in the world which are not technically advanced, means where technologically they are lagging behind. So those countries which are technologically highly developed, in those countries, okay, the society is highly developed, the culture is highly developed. But whereas the countries where the level of technological development is at its low, in those countries, both the social and the cultural development is also low. Okay, so here we can see that the level of technology, this is why here it has been mentioned that the technology, it indicates the level of cultural development of the society. Just take an example of the US. The US is technologically far advanced. So here the society and the culture is far developed than the African countries where the level of technology is very much low actually. So human beings were able to develop technology after they developed better understanding of the natural laws. So how does this technology came into existence, or how did the human beings they started developing the technology actually? Okay, so we human beings, we develop the technology, okay, after we develop better understanding of the natural laws. Means when the human beings they started understanding the law of the nature, they started understanding different phenomena of the nature, then only they started developing the technology. Okay, then only they started developing the technology. Like just take an example, in the early, when the early human beings existed, at that time they were mainly dependent on hunting and gathering. But when they one day when they started like doing friction with the help of the stones and rock, okay, and the rocks and all, what happened, they saw that some sparks were coming out when they were rubbing the stones. So later on they developed the fire. Okay, they came to know how to make fire and all, and what is the use of fire actually. Okay, so how did the human beings they develop fire actually? First they understood the development like friction. Means by rubbing the stone, a friction will be friction will take place, which will create some sparks, and this sparks can create fire, actually generate fire. Okay, so this is why it is said that human beings were able to develop technology after they developed better understanding of the natural laws. So technology got developed only when the human beings they understood the natural laws, the natural events, the natural phenomena. So here are some more examples to understand. Okay, or there are some more examples which shows us that how did the various natural phenomena it helped the human beings to develop the most advanced technology. See, for example, the understanding of the concept of friction and heat, it helped us develop fire, discover fire. So the understanding of the concept of friction and heat, it has helped us to discover fire. In the similar way, understanding of the secrets of DNA and genetics, it has enabled to conquer many diseases. Okay, like when the human beings they developed the scientific knowledge and all, okay, they started treating the people and all, they started developing understanding the secrets of DNA. Like in the modern day, okay, the more we understand about the DNA system of the human beings and all, the more it becomes easier to treat the diseases. Now the COVID is going on, so like the scientists at the initial period, they were very much tense, like how to tackle these problems, how to tackle the problem of COVID and all. Okay, but when they started understanding that how this COVID is it is like the virus are being formed and how do they spread and how do they attack the human beings and all, now they started creating the vaccines, created starting the medicines and all to restrict the virus, okay, so that the virus cannot cause much harm to the people. So how it has become possible? How we have developed the modern technology? Because of understanding of the DNA and the genetics, isn't it? So in the same way, in the earlier period of time also, when the people used to fall ill, at that time, they used to take help of the various medicinal plants and the herbs to treat the diseases and all. And how did they came to know about this, its use? Because of understanding about the genetics and all. Okay, like the science, okay, like the science operations we are doing, we are treating the people and all. This is not new actually. It is many thousands of years old actually. Susruta, okay, who was the first person to use this operations and all, surgery and all, isn't it? So this is why it is said that understanding of the nature and the natural phenomena are very much important to develop technology. Okay, like the law of aerodynamics has helped to develop faster planes. Like the earlier human beings, they saw the birds flying. Okay, the earlier scientists and all, they saw the birds flying, so they were confused, how do the birds fly actually? So later on they understood the main law behind the birds flying in the sky, and they came up with the law of the aerodynamics. And this law of the aerodynamics, it helps us to develop the planes and all. And now the people can travel from one part of the world to another within few hours, within, okay, means it may be the distance between 2 3 countries can be traveled between few hours, within few hours only, okay, with the help of the aeroplanes. So how we have developed this technology? Because of developing the because of understanding the natural law. And what was the natural law? We saw the birds flying. Okay, so this was the natural phenomena, the birds were flying, that was the natural phenomena. We saw that, we tried to understand and all, okay, and we came up with the law of aerodynamics. Okay, so this is how different events which takes place in our surrounding, okay, different phenomena which takes place in our surrounding, okay, it provides us with lot of knowledge, it provides us with some information. And if we work on this information, if we work on this knowledge we gather from the nature, we can develop many things, we can develop many technology and all. Okay, so here you can see that knowledge about the nature is extremely important to develop technology, and the technology loosens the shackles of environment on human beings. Okay, it's a very important quote actually. So the knowledge about the nature is extremely important actually to develop technology, because without the knowledge about the nature, a person cannot develop the technology. Okay, and when the technology is developed, okay, the technology loosens the shackles of the environment, because the environment has many secrets in it. Okay, the natural environment, the physical environment has many secrets in it, and in order to explore that, we need the help of the technology. So this is why it is said here that technology loosens the shackles of environment on human beings. Okay, so this is why it is said that technology loses the shackles of environment on human being. That means the environment is the storehouse of many resources. The environment is the storehouse of many concepts, many knowledges and all. Okay, and this can be explored with the help of technology. Means nature helps us in developing technology, and technology, on the other hand, it helps us in gathering more information about the nature. It helps in exploring the nature in a more better way, in a more efficient way. Okay, so this is why it is very much essential to know about the nature. Okay, to know about the nature, to understand the natural phenomena and all, to live a better life. Okay, to make the human society more developed. Okay, and this is how the early human beings who were dependent on hunting and gathering has evolved into the modern human beings who are now, like we human beings are now, with the help of technology, is sending the rockets, is sending the satellites on the solar system. We have reached the Mars, we have reached the moon and all. Okay, just because of the understanding of the natural phenomenon. So this is how the natural laws, okay, it helps us in developing technology, and the technology, on the other hand, it helps us in revealing the secrets of the environment. It loosens the shackles of the environment on the human beings actually. Okay. So in the earlier stages, okay, now we are going to the main discussion about this naturalization of human and environmental determinism. See, so in the earlier stages of the interaction with the natural environment, human beings were greatly influenced by it. Okay, so just imagine about the early human beings, okay, who were not having any kind of technological development, who used to live in the forest, who were dependent on the forest for their food, shelter, everything. Okay, so in their early stage of the interaction, in the early stage of their interaction means the interaction of the early human beings. Okay, with their natural environments, human beings were greatly influenced by it. Okay, so in the earlier period of human history, during the time of the early human beings, okay, we human beings were greatly influenced by the natural environment. That means everything, our food habit, our shelter, the everything was totally dependent on the nature. Okay, means we are totally dependent on the nature. And even in the earlier period, they adapted to the dictates of the nature. Okay, in the earlier period, we human beings, okay, our ancestors, they adapted to the dictates of the nature. Okay, means their entire livelihood, their food, shelter, everything, okay, it got adapted with the nature actually. So people living in the polar areas, in the hotter areas, they got adapted themselves to the surrounding physical environment. Okay, so this is so because the level of technology was very low, and the stage of human social development was also primitive. So why this happened? In the earlier period of human history, the human beings were dictated by the nature, because in the earlier period of human history, the level of technology was at its very low. The level of technology was very low. Okay, and the stage of human social development was also primitive. Even the society, okay, the human society was not so much developed. The cultural development was not there actually. So this is why in the earlier period of human history, human beings were totally dependent on the nature. Okay, human beings were totally dependent on the nature for their food, shelter, everything. They used to fear the nature, and this is the reason that they used to worship the nature. And even today, we can find there are many tribal groups who worship the nature. Okay, because it has been an ancient tradition. Our forefathers, they used to worship the nature, as because they were fearful, they used to fear the nature. So that tradition is still going on, and still today we can see many people, we worship the nature, we fear the nature at present also. Okay, so this type of interaction between the primitive human society and the strong forces of nature was termed as the environmental determinism. Okay, so this situation, okay, the earlier period actually, okay, when the when the human beings were totally dependent on the nature for their food, shelter, everything, they were dictated by the nature, they were fearful of the nature. So such a situation is known as environmental determinism. Okay, so environmental determinism is the situation when the nature used to rule the human beings. Every aspects of human life was dictated by the nature actually. Okay, so when this environmental determinism existed in the earlier time, when the level of technology was not so much developed. Okay, so this type of interaction between the primitive human society and the strong forces of nature was termed as the environmental determinism. And even such a situation can be found in some parts of the world, basically the areas which are inhabited by some of the primitive tribal groups. Like if you visit some of the tribal areas of Africa, even in Andaman and Nicobar also, we find some of the tribal groups. So those groups of people are still dependent on the nature for their survival. They are still dictated by the natural forces actually. Okay, because they have not adapted with the present technology. They are not trying to adapt with the nature present technology. Okay, so this is what. So this environmental determinism is also known as naturalization of human. Okay, it is also known as naturalization of human. Why? Because human beings were naturalized at that earlier period. Okay, human beings were totally naturalized, means every aspect of human beings was dependent on the nature actually. Okay, so such a situation, when the level of technology was very low, human beings used to worship the nature, they used to fear the nature, and they were totally dependent on the nature, is known as the environmental determinism. See, at that stage of very low technological development, we can imagine the presence of a naturalized human who listened to the nature, was afraid of its fury, and worshipped it. Okay, so at that stage of very low technological development, we can imagine the presence of a naturalized human beings. Okay, so when the level of technology was very low, the like naturalized human beings used to present there. Okay, these human beings, they used to worship the nature, they used to listen to nature. Why? Because they used to fear the nature actually. So at that period of human history, there's a direct dependence of human beings on the nature for resources which sustain them. Okay, so in this period of environmental determinism, there was a direct dependence of the human beings on the nature for what? For the resources which used to sustain them. So what kind of resources used to sustain them? Basically the food. Okay, the fruits, vegetables, and all which they used to get from the nature. Okay, the physical environment for such societies become the mother nature. So the surrounding environment, okay, the physical environment for such societies, okay, who are totally dependent on the nature, okay, it became the mother nature. They started worshipping the nature as their mother. Okay, so such a situation where humans were dictated by the nature were naturalized and is known as naturalization of human or environmental determinism. Okay, so such a situation where human beings were dictated by the natural forces, they were dictated by the nature, okay, is known as the naturalization of humans or environmental determinism. So like in the earlier time, what used to happen when the human beings, they learned about the agricultural system and all. Okay, like they were totally dependent on the environment, natural environment for the rainfall. Means when rainfall will take place, then the crops will grow and then they can have some food to eat. But now the human beings, they don't depend on the nature for this doing the agricultural production and all, because in most of the areas we are having the irrigation facilities. Okay, so with the help of the irrigation facilities, okay, the farmers, they are able to grow the crops even if the rainfall is less or even if the rainfall arrives late. Fertility of the soil was mainly dependent. We were totally dependent on the natural fertility of the soil for growing the crops. But now we are having the chemical fertilizers and the pesticides for growing the crops, which increases the productivity. So this shows, okay, that how we human beings has transformed from an early human to the modern human. Okay, how our life, which was dictated by the nature earlier, is now ruled by the technology actually. Now everything is being utilized. We are taking help of the technology for everything. Now, like 5 years, 10 years ago also, okay, like 5 to 10 years ago also, like now how we are interacting, how I am conducting the class over the laptop, over the mobile phones and all, it was not developed that time, because at that time this technology, telecommunication technology, was not so much developed. So this is why at that time physical classes were mainly like existed actually. Okay, and in the times of natural calamities also, like we had to depend on the physical classes and all. But now with the ease of this technological development, we are able to conduct the classes online. Okay, so why this has happened? Actually because of technological development. So the similar thing happened between the earlier human beings also. Means when the technological development was nil, they did not have any kind of technological development, they were dictated by the nature. Okay, they used to they were adapted with the natural phenomena. But now as because the technological development is there, now we human beings are no more dependent on the nature. Rather, we are utilizing the nature ruthlessly. We are causing damage to the nature. So how we are causing damage to the nature with the help of technology, that we are going to discuss in the next half of this chapter, that is humanization of nature, which is also known as possibilism. Okay, so this is the first phase of human history, the naturalization of human or environmental determinism. It basically describes the situation of the early human beings, when early human beings were totally dependent on the nature and they were dictated by the nature. Okay, and the next phase which we are going to discuss is about the humanization of the nature, that how these early human beings, with the passage of time, they started understanding the nature and the natural phenomena, and they started developing the technology. And with this technology, they started utilizing the nature and they started developing the better technology. And with the help of the better technology, now how we are utilizing the nature, how we have controlled the nature at present. Okay, and this nature which used to control us before, now we are controlling the nature at present. Okay, so this is the main concept. This is the main concept of this chapter, nature and scope of human geography. Okay, so this chapter basically discusses, okay, this chapter, this environmental determinism and possibilism, it tries to helps us in understanding that how the society got developed from like a naturalized society to a technologically developed society, and how did the concept of human geography came into existence. Okay, and how did the subject matter of human geography came into existence actually, because human geography discusses the interrelationship between the nature and the technology. Okay, so here in this first phase only we can understand that the relationship between the nature and the technology. Okay, and in the second phase we'll understand that how the nature and the technological development interacted actually to make the human beings more developed technologically, to become more developed culturally, economically and socially. Okay, so this is what about this topic for today's discussion.